topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host and their guests, and not those of W4CS Radio, its employees, or affiliates. W4CS makes no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening to the Cancer Support Network on W4CS.com.
Welcome. It's Arti with Light Up Your Life, and we are in the month of March already. I believe the countdown to spring, I believe it's down to 20. I know that we had a really nice day yesterday where I am here in Virginia, and it was nice and sunny. It's sunny today too, but a little cold, and I just want us to remember all of the different facets of weather and what it looks like and what it all means. And I know that it continues to be a heavy time. I know we've had this cyclical cycle of heaviness and ups and downs and in our world. And now as we enter a new era of getting back together in different ways, I just also want you to acknowledge the people in your lives that it may take a little bit of time to want to get back to getting together, and please just be respectful of everybody's choice on what they choose to do, whether they still want to wear their masks while everybody's not, whether they don't want to get their children vaccinated or not, or whatever this comes down to. You know, all of the guests that come on this show, myself, the producer of this show, the Talk for Media team, really believe in non-judgment and having information accessible and to allow people to empower themselves. And why I'm sharing this message with you is I think we have become very judgmental of people and their decisions. And I want to remind you, as long as we do things truly out of a place of caring for ourselves, I believe in ahimsa, which is that idea from Mahatma Gandhi and nonviolence. And nonviolence and ahimsa is basically that Sanskrit word of saying that I choose to act nonviolently in my communication, through my thoughts, through my actions. And so what that actually is communicating is non-judgment. So if we all could embrace the idea of non-judgment, especially right now, and I encourage you to spend time to work on that element while we see such suffering occurring around the world and in our nation. What has happened for so many families who've been displaced, or things have happened. And so I just want to remind us to be really humble to the gifts that we have, which are access to water, shelter, and food, and keep it really simple with gratitude. I'm working on a simple gratitude practice every morning because I think we can get really convoluted in what it looks like. And I'm reminded when I work with my clients every day what gratitude needs to look like when you are in a place where you can have worked through things and can, and you have been given the ability to work through things. Not everyone gets that privilege, right? It's almost like it seems like it's a privilege, but we're working in a time when it needs to be the norm. And so I think today's topic, and I think today's presenter or speaker, our podcast guest, Dr. Marni Hill, she has so many gifts. One of them that speaks to me is she's also someone who's been in education for a long time, way longer than I was, but she served in the education setting for 35 years as a special education teacher, which those of you who know that field know that it is in the field of education, it's definitely a heart beyond a heart. And I want to acknowledge our past, present, and future educators, early childhood. Of course, I still work with a lot of early childhood educators um, and I really love that role. And then our future ones that are coming up, and of course, our present ones. So just to acknowledge that special population. And she has worked through her own trauma, and we'll be discussing that today, and has led her into authorship. She has gone on to seek out her doctoral degree, and then she has done amazing things with really working with her clients and how to address trauma in a trauma-informed lens, but to how to make sense of our stories so that we can then be able to serve, which is exactly what she's doing. So today's topic theme is addressing trauma, making sense of our stories is kind of the highlight. But as you know, in this show, we kind of go all over the place because stories have so many different ways they go, but they all come to that common theme. And Marnie will be sharing her story of God Came to My Garage Sale, which is such an excellent title, and we'll get into that as well. All right, without any further ado, we welcome Marnie to our show today.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me on your show.
And I apologize, I didn't say your last name. I just said Marni Hill.
That's okay. It's a hard one. Faderero.
Potorero.
Yeah, that's all
Is
right.
it an Italian last name? Am I
It
making a
is. Yes.
presumption? That's a beautiful name. So, Dr. Mike, can you just start? First of all, what do you want to be called? I always ask everyone.
Marnie is fine.
Okay, Marnie. Yes, I have become very. I ask all of my clients now, "What do you want to be called?" You never know what anyone wants to be called unless you ask them.
Right. No, just
You,
Marnie's fine.
yeah. So, Marnie, tell us where does your story start? How did you get into this line of work? And it becomes a timeline. I know you're gonna get to unfold and share your wonderful story with us, but how have you gotten into this line of work?
Well, the line of work I'm in right now is writing and being an author. And as you mentioned in the intro, which was very kind, thank you. And also your beginning message to your audience was just beautiful and heartfelt, and resonates with my values as well. So we're on the same page there. But so let's see. I, as you mentioned, I was a teacher, special education high school teacher for 35 years. 12 of those years, I was an adjunct university professor at Northern Illinois University. So I spent the majority of my life in the Chicago suburbs. Um, I was living the American dream, raising two kids, loving my career as a teacher, very involved in my life with volunteer endeavors, and just going along. But I was ignoring a lot of red flags, like many of us do along the way. And I chose to leave my marriage after 27 years. And I realized it was not healthy and toxic, and my values of honesty and goodness and having your back, that kind of thing, were not the same values of who my partner was. And we just didn't align with that. And so I pretty much left, almost escaped that situation after 27 years, close to retirement. And just kind of trying to put the pieces of the puzzle of my life together. Why do bad things happen to good people? And just trying to make sense of all of these things. In the midst of my transitioning from the life that I knew to something unknown, I had to have a garage sale. And at this garage sale, some miracles happened, and there were too many and they were too profound. that I couldn't ignore them. So I was compelled to write about them. And so I wrote my 2020 Best Books award-winning spiritual fiction, God Came to My Garage Sale. And that was prominently endorsed by James Redfield, which was awesome. And it just, I found that through writing, it was very healing for me. And then I went on to write a 4-book series called True Deceit, False Love. And that explores domestic violence and narcissistic abuse and parental alienation, some of the family trauma dynamics I was, trying to navigate my way through and understand. And I really realized that, I was always coming from a place of goodness and love and compassion, and I continue to have those values. And um, so I really, but I needed to sort of understand what I was going through. And so I ended up doing a lot of research, not only in the family violence part, but also spirituality, and just saw that there was an interconnectedness to both of those. And the writing was very healing. So I ended up writing this 4-book series, and it's, been very well received by other prominent endorsers in the field. In fact, I just was actually in yesterday's paper, in my local paper. They put me on,
Wow.
I know, I can't believe it. They put me on the cover there with a
Oh
3-page
my,
spread about the power to heal.
oh my
And
goodness.
my message is that, yeah, that just happened yesterday. The message is, my message is that, words have the power to hurt, but words also have the power to heal and help people understand and make sense of their experiences. It's very important to do some research into what you go through, but also do some of the inner work. Look back at your own intergenerational, relationships, your family dynamics, your core wounds, and see how that played a role in how your life played out. And so that's what I've been doing. And I ended up moving from the Chicago suburbs to the Caribbean. So I am living just a beautiful life immersed in nature. You were talking about weather earlier, and it's we do have seasons here, which I have learned after my 3 years so far of being here. But it's just wonderful. Every day is a new adventure, and I'm so blessed, and I'm filled with gratitude that not only can I experience what I'm experiencing, but that I'm able to follow my passions of writing, and in doing so, hopefully help other people in various stages of their awareness to any kind of domestic family, challenges that they might have.
Totally. Um, Marnie, where do you live in the Caribbean? Because there are a lot of beautiful islands. So which one in
Where am I?
specific?
Yeah, I'm in St. Croix, which is the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yes, that's amazing. Can you talk about, and then we'll dive into everything, but I'm just curious, how did you make that? Because it is a leap of faith when we do relocate, whether it
Yeah.
be at any stage. But how was it? You actually, I mean, it is a whole new immersive experience for you. How did you decide to just go ahead and do it, that plunge?
Well, I've always been a lover of world travel. As a child, I even lived a year and a half in Greece, in Athens, Greece, which really was had a significant impact on me, because I always was someone who was accepting and interested in other cultures, in other languages, in other customs, um, in other people's beliefs. Just have a non-judgmental, open-minded view of that. And luckily, after leaving my abusive, marriage, a very, very close friend of mine and I became even closer. And now he is my life partner. And we were very fortunate before the world's challenges to be able to travel a lot. We spent a month in India. We spent a month in Thailand, a month in Israel. We went all over the United States. And and even Iceland. I mean, we got to see so many wonderful places, but we always kept coming back to the Caribbean because we love the sun. I love the ocean, which I am in every day or every other day. My partner Rick, he loves astronomy and scuba diving, and this is a perfect locale for that. So we actually spent about 3 years coming back and forth to St. Croix, looking at homes. And looking at the different areas in the island, on the island. There's a west end and an east end, which are very different, both wonderful in their own ways. But we really took a lot of time to narrow down exactly where we would like to be, and it all worked out beautifully. So I retired from my 35-year career as a teacher, and the very next day we moved.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just been wonderful.
The reason why I ask you that question is I think it's always important for, uh, I think it's important for when people get to hear a story that we all have dreams and desires, right? And sometimes we're the ones who, but when you really have done the work and really addressed some of what is holding us back, can you then really let the floodgates open to your dreams and aspirations and goals? Is what
Most
I truly, and I
definitely.
see that in your story.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I do know some folks who, when they retire, they're still very unsure of making that leap of faith to whether it be living in the same house or same location after 30 years. It's still very difficult to take that leap, right? Which clearly you were listening to all the signs too.
Right, but at the same time, I was actually, in a way, forced to make a decision because of my choice to leave what I had known for so long. I knew there would be repercussions. I knew that there would be challenges. I knew just because of the kind of person that I am that I would have positive adventures that would be in my future. So, that wasn't moving here was never part of my long range plan. My plan was to have my two beautiful adult children in my life, which I don't now because of parental alienation. I had planned to be able to stay in my beautiful home that you put so much love and care into the inside and outside of where you believe would be your forever home. Well, even though I was told it was paid off for 10 years, that was a lie. So it was foreclosure, taxes weren't paid. The bottom line is I could not stay there. So really some decisions were actually made for me due to my circumstances. But instead of having feelings of anger or resentment or definitely I had feelings of shock and I was in survival mode for a long time. But I really tried to be thankful for the blessings that I had for all those years. Thankful that I had my children in my life and that I was in their life for 2 decades, with no issues. Unfortunately, with abusers, what happens when you choose to leave, and their narrative and gets changed and their mask kind of falls off because they want to, portray a certain persona, to the public. When that gets kind of altered, they will turn on you in a real revengeful manner and take everything away from you, smear your name, do all of that. And then, unfortunately, in many cases, it happens to both men and women, husbands and wives, where there's a campaign of denigration where they get the kids to align with them and completely cut off the parent. The knowledge is power, though. So as painful as this journey has been with this part of it, I think reaching out to other researchers and reading the literature and tuning in on podcasts and taking a look at how other people have navigated this situation has really, really helped me understand what parental alienation is, or understand the dynamics of an abuser and why they do what they do, and understand myself more of why was I a perfect target for this kind of thing. So I believe that knowledge is, really can help make sense of things. You still have to grieve and go through the emotional work. And I think that that journey will probably be a lifetime.
Totally.
It probably will be. But at the same time, I've always had a spirit about myself. I've always believed in goodness and honesty, and just I live in a state of gratitude. So I really have taken the negative and done the best I can with it and turned it into a positive for myself.
Yeah, I hear that. And we do talk a lot about gratitude because that one, I mean, I feel like, uh, that Leo Tolstoy has this quote that I quote all the time. I probably quoted twice in this show or three times or more over the last year, but that time, time and patience are the two most important words in the world. But then I also think it's gratitude and mindfulness are the two others, because living presently in the moment, like savoring the moment, what does that mean, and how can we truly embrace? Because that is what it comes down to. And then that feeling of gratitude. I
Right.
think
And we make choices. We make choices of how we respond to situations that are in front of us. We cannot control other people and what they do, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's sincere or insincere. We can't control that. But with experience and time and patience, um, along with the gratitude and mindfulness, we really can be present and live a happier life and continue, like in my case, to role model, even though my children are adults. I still feel as a mother, you never stop being a mother. And so role modeling goodness and how you handle adversity, I think, is very important. And luckily that has come naturally for me. But the writing, I will say the writing has been extremely healing.
writing is such a powerful tool. I can't wait to dive in that with you a little more. But Marnie, can you address this topic? Because of parent alienation, first of all, what is the definition when you think of, like, when you think of what it means, and what does it mean in your story, and what does it mean, and how do people address? How do you begin to tackle that? Because it is such a complex piece. You know.
It is very complex. And I will preface this by saying, if you uh, have separated from a narcissistic, we're not diagnosing, but, an abuser,
Mhm.
um, you know, uh, it all depends really on the level of their severity of their actions, because abuse can take on many different forms, and it can actually be on a spectrum from very mild to very severe extreme. And people think it's just, only if you are physically hit, but no, it involves gaslighting and smearing and emotional type of
Mhm.
abuse. But
Mhm.
so parental alienation takes on different forms also depending on the age of the children. And so if you are leaving an abuser, um, separating, and there are custody issues or visitation issues, or if you're in legal court situations with your ex, and you're dealing with minor children, that takes on a whole nother form. um, because a lot of the courts, the lawyers, the judges, they're not knowledgeable about narcissistic abuse or parental alienation. Um, they can oftentimes be convinced by the abuser to even have full custody and stuff like that, because they are very charismatic. They love conflict and chaos and the courtroom, and they love the fact that they're getting their ex to have to be stressed out and lose all their money and lose all their safety and security. So they enjoy that kind of interaction where the targeted parent, the one that is just shocked to find out maybe that the kids are refusing to see them on their visitation days or something like that, they look like they're a little bit unhinged, because it is so unnatural when you've had a loving relationship with your kid to have it torn apart, have them basically stolen. Luckily, in my particular case, my children were adults, so I did not have to deal with that, the custody issues. But there's certainly the campaign of denigration ramped up, and it really did, even though the relationships were positive and loving, and there were absolutely no complaints about me as a parent until I decided to leave my abuser. Then the stories are made up and changed. But parental alienation is when a child aligns with a parent, but it's the parent that is more controlling or abusive or manipulative. Their love is a lot more conditional than the other parent, whose love is unconditional. And usually that parent is the primary caregiver, or they've always been there for them, or they also have, tried to teach their children. So when I don't usually like the word discipline, but when you try to help encourage your child to take responsibility and make your bed and clean your room and, be nice, send a thank you note, whatever, all those positive learning lessons get kind of turned around. And this can happen to men and to women. Like I said, it is not gender specific at all. And alienation can also involve extended family members. So what happens is the child, whether they're young or adults, they get involved in what's called splitting. It's a psychological term, but where everything is all black or all white. There's no gray area. So this parent, I'm going to align with this parent. In my case, it's the dad, because he's all good, and mom now is all bad. And so they can't, with the splitting, they can't, they align with one, and they completely unjustly reject the other parent. There's a lot of research on this. And if some of your audience thinks that they might be going through parental alienation, or they went through it, or they know someone involved in this, the best thing to do is to seek out information on it, research. There are top professionals in the field. In fact, one of them endorsed my book, True Deceit, False Love. That was Jennifer Harmon, Dr. Jennifer Harmon, who is a researcher out of Colorado, who not only talks to people about the dynamics of parental alienation, but also conducts research on it to peer-reviewed work that's published in scientific journals, explaining the phenomenon of parental alienation. But it's an absolutely devastating family dynamic, and it's very, very painful. The abuser wants to do anything they can to destroy their ex-spouse. But unfortunately, what they're doing is really destroying the children. They're setting up the children for just a lifetime of family trauma. And it's very hard to get the kids to see the truth in all of this, especially if they are younger and they've been told all sorts of things that are not true. They're either outlandish lies, or they're partial truths, like half truths, where they make up a part of the story, but it's enough to turn a child, the child will turn against that parent. And a couple other things to note here. There's a phenomenon called independent thinker phenomenon, where the children at one point believe that it's just them making the decisions. That, oh no, the other parent didn't say anything. They never talk bad about that other parent. I've made this decision on my own, which is so far from the truth. They are being coerced and manipulated in a very secret agent kind of underhanded way. And another term to look up and to understand is Stockholm syndrome. So Stockholm syndrome, that title came from a bank robbery in Sweden where the tellers aligned with the bank robbers, the bad guys that were doing illegal things, and they were very sympathetic to their plight. They kind of like what you would see in a cult, and cults happen even with adults, where adults can cut off their family. They want nothing to do with anyone that they know because they're being isolated and align with the abusing person. So parent alienation is very much like a cult, and it's very helpful to understand it, but it's still very heartbreaking because you're living life without your children. You're missing milestones like graduations and birthdays and holidays, and sometimes they'll even take it to the extreme and take out orders of protection against you, so that you are legally not allowed to reach out to send a message of love. But it's not the children's fault. I feel so bad for these kids when they finally figure it out, because they've got to feel so guilty for what they've done to that other parent, how they've treated that other parent, what they've said and what they've done. But really, it is not the children's fault. They are abused just like the ex-spouse was abused. So knowledge is power, but that is kind of in a nutshell what parental alienation is and how it plays out, in the family dynamic.
Yeah, thank you for that. And
Yeah.
because there are words that are tossed around so often, and there's a lot of assumptions made now that we are entering this world of introducing a lot of psychology and mental health and neuroscience in the world. And I think we have to remember that not everyone knows terminal. Like I learned, and not everyone's perspective is the same. So I always ask everyone to define these terms.
Right. And actually, okay, so here's my first book on true deceit, false love. It is 15,555 terms and phrases on domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, and parental alienation. And Dr. Sam Vaknin, who wrote the foreword to my book, actually coined a lot of these terms. And this whole series actually came out of me seeking out, like, what does this mean? What are the definitions to these terms? Because you do hear people, just like in any genre or any profession, you hear terminology tossed back and forth that may not be familiar to you. And so instead of writing a dictionary or glossary, because there are so many definitions, I just wrote these words to later look up, and the list of 100 turned to 1,000, and then 10,000, and then 15,000. So I purposely, and actually Dr. Vaknin commends me on that by not including definitions, because part of the healing of understanding what you've been through is to take maybe these terms and look them up, but at the same time, you're connecting the dots to your own experience and you're making it much more relevant for you. And then what I did then with the second book and the third book, so I won't hold them all up, but the second and third book, that the one I just held up was a survivor's workbook, but I found acrostic poetry to be a great way of understanding some of these terms. So you can take a term like parental alienation, like we talked about, or brainwashing, or scapegoat, or whatever, gaslighting, whatever words you want to use, and make a poem either about an emotional response to this, what's happened, or even a definition that's sort of embedded into the acrostic poem. It's very informational. In fact, the second book in the series has 338 acrostic poems. So it's 13 poems for each letter of the alphabet. And so just reading these poems can provide validation for anyone that might be going through something like this, to help understand, the dynamics. And then the workbook, where I explain acrostic poetry, give an example, give suggested terms, provide a list of terms that they can choose from, or the readers can come up with their own terms or names or phrases that have meaning to them, and they can, through the writing of these poems, they can, get it out. If we bottle up all our emotions, especially traumatic ones, that wreaks havoc not only on our emotional state, but also our physical health can suffer.
Mhm.
So getting it out in some way is very, very healthy and therapeutic. And so I'm just providing one of many tools for people that might find themselves needing to just learn about this and express themselves.
Mhm. Yeah. And you're right. The emotional response does get lodged in our body, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's no doubt it does, it very much so, especially with trauma. It does stay lodged until it.
An amazing reference book for that is The Body Keeps Score.
Oh, yeah, the body keeps.
Love that book. Wow. It really, very technical, very scientific, but it really sheds a light on how trauma does stay with us. And that's why lots of times you see adults in their 40s and 50s, and in my case, 60s, finally having a light bulb about past experiences that they had. Because we do kind of bury a lot of our trauma, and we just try to live life and just think, okay, if we ignore it, it'll go away. But
Mhm.
really it doesn't. It festers, and if we don't acknowledge it and confront it in some way that is safe for us to confront it, we don't self-actualize, and we are held back.
That is so the truth.
Yeah.
Um, Marnie, I do want to highlight something you said earlier, and I think about this a lot too when we have litigation and legal involved, especially with custody. That oftentimes there hasn't been a lot of mental health training. It's the same example that I have one guest come on and we talk about health and nutrition when a lot of them have gone to med school, but then they had no courses in nutrition or even in
Right.
death and dying and mortality, right? Which is a huge piece of the puzzle on how to handle both components. There's just no education.
Right.
So, and the goal is now, of course, it's changing slowly, of course. But regardless, and when you said that, I had that light bulb again, because it is true when these legal decisions are being made, and I have, of course, in my own circle of friends where the litigation was really diff because that narcissistic personality can very much use the word charismatic. It's
Charismatic.
almost
They
like
are
an
very convincing.
actor, right? It's an
Yeah.
actor that can come on stage in that courtroom in front of people and perform.
Right.
And so I'm really glad you highlight, because oftentimes these, and I'm don't want to be sexist, but in my experience it's been women because it was their husbands, but it can be both ways. And I want our audience to understand that we are
Yes.
acknowledging that I'm acknowledging both inside. Marnie, I imagine you are too.
Yes.
I'm just using females in my own personal example, but the fact is they were just like, what is happening, like this deconstruction, defamation of my character, in addition to this like you're bringing up parental alienation, in addition to grief and loss of losing the marriage, because you did think you'd be married forever, you did
Yeah.
bring up the house,
Yeah.
you thought this was my forever house, all of this disintegration of self happening all at the same time.
Right. And unfortunately, the legal proceedings can re-abuse you.
Mhm.
So just from personal example, I filed for divorce in 2013,
Mhm.
and it's been almost a decade. And there was no minor children involved at all. It's not like we had big estates. In fact, we had lost everything, as
Mhm.
far as our home, and I lost all my assets.
Mhm.
But it's just unbelievable. But even close to a decade later, my ex-husband is still taking me to court. So I am still involved in legal proceedings. And there are, to me, it's so evident, the lies and the misinformation and everything put into that. But they want to, when they lose you, they become obsessed, many of them, and they just
Mhm.
want your demise. Even if they are successful in killing you, physically killing you, murdering you, or having you murdered, they still will keep this narrative going. And so it's unbelievable, but the courts do really side many times with the abuser because they are not only charismatic, but they are calm, they're cool and collected, and they just are so convincing. And you have to go through so much to try to defend your innocence. And it's just mind-blowing. And so unfortunately a lot needs to be done as far as awareness with the legal system. The people also that continue to take you back to court, they're the ones with lots of excess money. It's nothing to them to just have to pay legal fees and have this play out, where the person that was targeted is oftentimes left in a situation where they don't have the funds to defend themselves. And or the emotional, after a while it just gets like, really, you still need to keep doing this. So it's such an unfortunate thing. And I actually have found too that not all people in the legal system are ethical. And you will find some lawyers that believe in truth and justice. Luckily I have one of those wonderful lawyers right now. But I didn't. I had many, many other lawyers that did not have that ethical background. In fact, one of them still is almost re-abusing me with, you know, um, false fees and constant, just monthly re-abuse after all these years. Just they are not always as ethical as you think. And so, just like in any profession, you realize not everyone is in it for good intentions.
Yeah.
And that's shocking because, you'd like to think that truth should just prevail. Here are the facts. Here are the facts.
Especially in this situation where you have such a vulnerable population. You have vulnerable, in most instances, children,
Yeah.
right? And then you have vulnerable the person who's been abused. They're already like their self-esteem, self-worth, a value, like where it is. And then you have these confounding variable. I mean, I have, again, the amount of lawyers on average that I hear when people go through is because they don't believe in their truth, or their fees are exponential because they, again, that the source of income was shared. Well, like there's so many components that people really don't understand, that it's
Right.
so
It's very, very much money driven, unfortunately. And, lawyers will just stop working with you at a certain point when they know you don't have the money to continue. But they'll also, then they move on to almost another victim in a way. But yes, usually the targeted person goes through, at least 5 to 15 lawyers, just trying to, just wanting justice and equality. I have no problem paying my fair share for anything. Like, for example, college expenses. It was written in there, what I was supposed to pay. No problem. I ended up paying though lots more than I was even supposed to because they switch numbers around. And they get away with it. And even if you bring it to someone's attention saying, wait a minute, that 2 should have been a 1 and that 1 should have been a 2, and it really is significant. Well, we're not going to do anything about that. And so it's just unfortunate because the targeted people are the honest people. We are just trying to do what's right. And, especially when it comes to our children, we would, do anything for them, it's just unfortunate. So yeah, it's like re-traumatizing a person. And so that's a whole nother thing to navigate. And unfortunately, there are a lot of dads and moms that struggle with being able to keep going after one trauma after another, because like you said, their self-worth gets sabotaged. They have been gaslit to believe that something is kind of wrong with them, even though nothing is wrong with them. They are acting they are reacting in a natural way to a very unnatural situation. So
Yes. Marnie, I really appreciate this conversation, and I, in the sense that I think, and I don't know if you felt this way in your story, but the fact is that oftentimes people are so alienated that they don't know that they have a story, or that this is, so for someone to hear in this moment 5 to 15 average, okay, wow, okay, it's
yeah,
not me, right? Can
right,
you,
right.
like, this not me is so important. I think as in more and more the victimization, that more and more that we are discussing this, the more and more that there is an identification, because you do feel so isolated and alone, and is it me, or what did I do wrong, or this, and the
And you've been
blame.
right, and you've been isolated for a long time.
Very much
Abusers
so.
work on isolating you, and they even isolate the children. Like,
Mhm.
unfortunately, sometimes siblings are actually isolated from each other. So as adults, they don't even have a relationship with their sibling because the abusing parent slowly worked on, same way that they did it with their ex-spouse, with outright lies or believable half truths. Whatever they do, they are separating the kids from each other and refusing to share where they live, what their phone number is, how to get in contact, that kind of thing. So then these kids just have a lifetime of just trying to, navigate things even themselves. So the
Mhm.
isolation is a very big part of it. And just when you need your support system, your friends and family, you find you don't have it. So it takes a very strong person to overcome this. And like you were saying, these conversations, as difficult as they are to have, they are important because we are sharing with others that they are not alone,
Mhm.
that this is not their fault. If they could see another person that survived this and what they did to heal, that can be very, very therapeutic. There's this wonderful psychologist practitioner named Anushka Marcin, and she is out of the UK, and she, does videos, YouTube videos and blogs almost on a daily basis. You know, just out of the goodness and kindness of her heart to reach out to try to help people. But what she does, and it was very significant for me, is she would put out journal prompts every week. So it would give you a tangible kind of framework to follow, to just try to get you thinking about what you've gone through and put it on paper. So that's,
Mhm.
so for me, that release, that approach was very, very helpful. But our voices matter. And it's important to let other people know out there that there's hope. And I believe that, we're all faced with challenges, especially the last couple of years. We've been faced with challenges. Our world has just been turned upside down. But how we respond to the challenges, can really have an impact on, our future. And whether we can live and self-actualize, feel good about ourselves, go on to enjoy life and to spread joy and love to others.
Totally.
Yeah,
Marnie, we are out of time, but I would love for you to come back in the fall so we can continue, because I do think this is a powerful conversation. And I do think the next can be this idea of, my brain is going towards the idea behind resiliency, because you are an example of resiliency. And so is a person in that situation. They're resilient in that moment, in that day. Um, and I think the power of today's conversation of making sense of our stories is that I take away from today that you are not alone, and that you are not alone, and the acknowledgement that there is support, and that you have a voice. Your voice matters and it counts. And yeah,
definitely. Justice does not always prevail, but goodness and truth and love always prevails.
yes. What a beautiful message. I don't even need to ask you your parting thoughts, because you just said it so beautifully.
Well, but I
Thank
really believe that. I really believe that. So,
you.
please, your audience that's out there, if you're going through this, you know someone that's going through this, realize that it is a very complicated situation, but knowledge is power, and approach all these challenges with love and goodness.
Thank you. And Marnie has her website listed it's listed for us by our production team. Thank you so much. And everyone have a wonderful week ahead. And please take the nuggets. And even if you're not someone who's been abused, please share this. Just share the message of making sure that they realize and acknowledge their truth. Please, if that's anything you can do, acknowledge what they're telling you. Thank you. Have a good one. Thanks, Marnie.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it went all right.
Yes. Goodbye.